even the part you said, God hates idolatry. I think we just lean on the grace of God so much that we forget that he hates our sin and what it does to us. It separates us from him and the people that love us the most, and it makes us self-centered.
I also love the biblical language, just that it connotes by saying, worshiping away addiction. It just kind of emphasizing that we are worshipers. We are always worshiping, and bringing it back to biblical language instead of it being hijacked by, what is the problem? Instant gratification, right? In your explanation of what those people wanted. But it was within the context of them literally fashioning an idol, which is what everybody normally thinks of immediately when we say idolatry, like fashioning an idol and bowing down to it, right? You're explaining, instant gratification is rooted in worship. It's rooted in worship. And whether you're worshiping some kind of a self-manufactured idol or looking to God for your ultimate satisfaction in what he says, I'm realizing more and more, it's important. Words matter. Really, biblical words really do matter, because there's all these connections that people have made in language to the words. Worshiping your way out of addiction, right? For me, I'd be like, well, I want to know what he means by that. And then you basically have already set the stage to be able to really communicate solid biblical truth to people because they're using that language.
Right. Even addiction is a word that's like kind of hijacked and connotates secular ideology, right? It's not a disease. That's one aspect to look at. Like, does it mimic a disease? Yeah, but we would call it slavery, right? Like, it does take you over in a sense, but it's not the medical biological disease model. It's not. And we categorically reject that. This is a relational word. And when you walk through Exodus 32, you can clearly see that addiction is idolatry.
Ed Welsh was giving some kind of a lecture, and he says people with addictions have a worship problem. And he said that when he said that, that's what kind of like clicked in John's mind. Like, that is true. And that was kind of like, almost from what I understood, kind of the beginning of Redemption House being created was that phrase being said in Piper's Church by Ed Welsh.
That was the light bulb moment. And this is where, again, like, the biblical language resonates. Like, when we talk about it as a worship problem, all we say is, did drugs or alcohol function as a god in your life, little g? And they go, well, yeah, I mean, dude, I was a slave to it. I gave everything for it, right? It didn't deliver on the promise. Like, all the concepts of idols in scripture. And one of the main words, or one of the main concepts when you think about idol is that they're empty. Like, that's really what the concept means in the Old Testament. It's empty. They don't give life. They actually steal it. And what happens? The longer you use drugs and alcohol, what happens, dude? They steal your joy. They steal your hope. They steal your peace. They steal everything from you. So every addict gets the concept of idolatry. They've just never been taught it, right? They've never been taught the language. So we do have to teach them the language. And the reason why we do that as biblical counselors is because if you don't think the Bible has anything to say about addiction, you're never going to open it. Addicts will never read it. If you think that, oh man, it doesn't say anything, the word codependency is not in the Bible, so therefore I'm going to go to the therapist down the street. But if the scriptures do talk about these terms, they just don't use the same exact word, then the Bible's going to open up to you. And that's what we see. Guys fall in love with scripture here. And that's one of my goals, is to make them biblical counselors by the time they leave here. Subtle goal. I don't tell them that on the front end.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the success points, if you will, of the 12-step models. They read the big book and they hear all these stories and testimonies, and they can relate to that. Well, you're doing something even better. You're connecting them to the very scriptures of God, so they can see themselves and where they fit in God's plan and in his plan of redemption and in his plan of salvation. And they hunger for the word, man. There's nothing better than sparking that desire and interest in them. And God's doing it through you. But I mean, I've seen it happen with the guys that have been a part of your program.
And part of that comes from my own journey. Man, when I became a Christian, I had no meaningful involvement in Alcoholics Anonymous. We tend to complicate things in our society. We make them out a little bit more complicated. I literally got discipled. I didn't know what the biblical counseling movement was even at the time. I literally got discipled in the word. and I found freedom. And so I know that it is possible.